Ben, hey, congratulations on your latest project, Twisters.
Thank you very much.
It's still in theaters for a lot of us, and now it's also available digitally today. But tell us how you were brought on board to this project.
I actually worked on the first Twisters, and so when they were coming up to do this project, they'd approached Industrial Light and Magic, the company I worked for, um, and they brought it to me, and I was initially a little apprehensive because the first one had been pretty tough, and but I thought it would be a great opportunity to work with the newest tool sets that we have today. And when I met Isaac, I was really Lee Isaac Chung, who is our director. I was just thought he'd be perfect for the film, and that it'd turn out to be a good movie.
Wow, I did not know that you worked on the first Twisters movie. 30 years, I want to say 30 years, a
Yeah,
lot,
28 years ago.
but
Yeah.
28 years. A lot of things have changed. So tell us what has changed remarkably from that first one to what it is now.
Well, a huge thing that changes, of course, the technology. Our computer power is so much more powerful than when we made the first one. Probably one of the simulations on Twisters would take up as much memory and space as all of the tornadoes we made on the first Twister film. So we've got a lot more firepower available. We also know a lot more about tornadoes. Our knowledge of meteorology has gotten a lot better. So there's scientific models we can reference. And then our whole tool set has become a lot more sophisticated. Now we can do really high-end fluid simulations with billions and billions of particles and objects. Whereas before we kind of had to make do with small particle simulations and approximations of clouds using surfaces of, almost like you made little sculptures of clouds in the past. Now we can actually do something that's much closer to real life.
Now, in the filming of Twisters today, were there like special needs of special equipment per se?
Yeah, we had a lot of special effects. Actually, same as on the first one, they used a lot of practical special effects, and we were able to do the same thing on this film. We shot on film like the original, and but the sort of camera cars and the sophisticated heads that you can use and remote cranes are a lot more sophisticated these days. And the effects team were able to that we had a big truck with giant fans on it and people spraying water on the windows. So the truck would drive along and behind them would be the actors in a vehicle. And then actually driving the vehicle would be a little guy on top in what we called a pod. And he sits on top and drives the vehicle so the actors can focus on the acting. And it's just gives you a lot of flexibility because you can move the cars around in relation to the camera car. It's a pretty good way of working. So there's all sorts of cool tools that we can use both to put the actors back in the scene because we've really got effects, rain, hail, dust, wind, all of that going for real. But we're able to do a much more, we can free up the camera a little bit as well.
So practicality is still the primary focus here on Twister. So tell us how the visual effects, like when you step in to enhance I want to say the effects, because when I sat in a theater, I really felt it. I'm too afraid to even watch it on like 4DX or something.
I know, I've heard it's really great in 4DX, but yeah, I mean, it is. We do a lot more in visual effects these days, let's be honest. I mean, the original Twister had, around 300 or so shots. We had 1,100 shots in this one. Um, but we really try to always anchor it in reality. We had a storm chaser crew that we sent out, who basically they went out 4 times in, they've got their vehicles are sort of protected from hail and that sort of thing. And they filmed a lot of great reference material and skies that we actually tried to use in the backgrounds of some of our tornadoes. So we'd have always that layer of reality that was going on. So it really does make it possible. And then even with the special effects, we weren't always able to use special effects all the time, particularly on the wide shots of the vehicles and that sort of thing. So usually what we tried to do is say, okay, special effects are going to give us the first, 60 feet or something. And then beyond that, it's got to be visual effects. But because we had this reference, both from the special effects team and from our storm chasers, who actually did get caught up in big hailstorms and rainstorms and everything else, we had a really good guide to match our visual effects to, our computer graphics to. So that sort of made it easier. And then you kind of want it to be, you don't want the audience to know, what they're looking at. Is it a computer graphic? Is it a practical thing on set, or is it real life? You try and blend those sort of things all the time.
Is it hard to blend these things because with the lighting and the fast movements because debris is flying all over the place in this.
Yeah. No, it does require there's a lot of hand rotoscoping work that had because we didn't want to shoot a lot blue screen if we didn't have to. So in general, what we do is we have someone who traces the outline of people like you might do in Photoshop or some other tool and frame by frame, and then we can integrate that with different ways that we can layer those images together in compositing. So it does take a bit of extra work, but we can also blend in, we can use the fact you're in hail and rain. It makes it a little easier to blend certain things in because you can get lost in all that weather and you don't necessarily see all the edges and such.
Now, what I love about this film, especially on the special effects side, is that it's hard for me to even tell that this is all done inside a studio. But you since now
There
now
isn't that much inside the studio. Sorry, go on.
yeah, no, but then tell us how all of this is accomplished outside because we imagine a production like this with the green or blue screen as a huge backdrop inside a studio, but that's very difficult to build outside, in fact.
Yeah, well, we don't tend to do it in blue screen. That's why we hand rotoscope the actors. The good thing about that is if you shoot something against a blue screen, sometimes you're in the situation where you've got blue behind, right? Or green if you're doing green screens. And so the reflections that might come on the edges of the characters, particularly if they're in the rain and that sort of thing, you've always got that little tint of blue or green in there that you have to deal with. If you're shooting in the field and trying to do it for real, well, for one thing, in some cases, you might get the shot in camera. If you're looking at the car, we're blasting it with hail and rain for real. We can just use that sort of shot and put it in the movie and not have to do anything to it. So if you're in a blue screen situation, you always would have to do something to it. And then if you do have to do something to it, if they're in the car, then sometimes it's quite easy, right? Because you will just use the hard edges of the car, for example, to find the edge of the scene. So it gives you a realism that you just don't get when you're shooting blue screen because the background behind them, even though you're going to change it, maybe put a tornado in there, it is more similar to what it will look like in the end than it would be if it was against a blue screen. So it just makes for a more realistic result. And the goal of that is to just make a more scary and involving and immersive experience for the people watching at home.
So was there any scenes in this film, basically done inside a studio?
Yeah, so one of the things that happened to us was we were filming, and as we were sort of like largely through production, and then we had the writers' strike last year, and then the actors' strike after that. So that shut us down. We had to go back home and that sort of thing. And then when we finally got back out to Oklahoma early December, the whole landscape had changed. So when we were shooting in summer, Oklahoma gets very green and beautiful in summer. When it gets to winter, it becomes really yellow and dry looking and such. So, and cold, of course. So we did have to end up going onto a blue screen a little bit towards the end. Instead of going out with our camera cars and shooting out in the scenery, we had to shoot some of that on a blue screen with people in a car that we could, maneuver around and that sort of stuff. But a couple of good things that we'd done was we knew that there would be some of that we would have to do. So we sent out what we call an array unit, which is basically a big car with a bunch of cameras around it that take a whole 360 view of the environment. So we had a lot of footage that we shot during summer in that beautiful, lush landscape. And then we also, because we'd really been shooting our actors in the cars then, we got great idea of what it should look like. So the camera team and myself and the director and the lighting team would study that real footage that we got and say, oh, how do we make sure that the cameras that we're using on the blue screen stage match what we did in real life? And so we tried to get all the dynamism and excitement that you get from barreling down the road with a truck with a camera on an arm bouncing up and down. And sometimes we would have the cameramen on little platforms on the sides of the cars, and they're harnessed in and they're sort of bouncing around and stuff. And we just made sure we tried to remember that when we were shooting on the more controlled environment, so that we would try and get that same sort of motion into our footage.
So when they pull off stunts like that, does that make your job significantly much harder?
No, it does a bit, but it's a good kind of hard. We actually did a bunch of tests early on to say, hey, should we should we have the special effects guys throw rain, throw hail? We did all these tests. And we said, you know what? There's such a win from this, even though it is more of a pain in the neck to deal with. It actually looks visually so much more realistic and believable to have that. Let's do it for real as much as possible. It's harder for the track. I would say that what we have to do when we add a computer effect like a tornado into a shot is we have to start by tracking the shot so that what we do in the computer will definitely match the thing. And a lot of the layout team that do that sort of tracking said, wow, this is one of the hardest films we've done since the original film. A couple of them, there are a few of us who actually date from back then, and they remembered we had to do a lot of that by hand in the original, mainly because the tool set wasn't as good. But now we went back to those time-honored techniques because these shots were so hard, the only really way to do some of them was by eye. But I think the result is something that's much more involving and scary and fun for people to watch.
So what was the greatest challenge for you on a production of Twisters?
I think the most challenging scene really was the scene where our crew are starting to chase the last tornado in the movie, and they end up in a heavy rain, foggy environment, and their GPS goes out. They don't know where they are, and they end up next to a big industrial facility just as the tornado rain comes in and just basically creates havoc in this facility. So this was something that we had to almost create from whole cloth. We had our cars, we had our actors, we were able to shoot them on a real country road, but then to make this giant exploding refinery, well, the refineries in Oklahoma are built not to blow up when tornadoes come through. And they also don't like us suggesting that they would maybe blow up when tornadoes come through. So they didn't want to let us film outside any of this. So we sent one of our crew out pretending he was a tourist taking photographs. And then we built the whole place in computer graphics. So then we had to build this and then destroy it with our CG tornadoes. And it was a challenging scene to work out what we would do to start with, and then to actually bring it to the screen.
Most excellent. Well, Ben, let me wrap it up with one last question, because you have quite an extensive resume when it comes to visual effects. Project after project after project, whatever you do, it is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. How do you approach when a director or the production company wants a vision, and do you ever come out and say, you know what, this is impossible? Or do you always say, no, we can make it work somehow?
Yeah, I think, I was the production side visual effects supervisor for this, but I work at ILM, and almost all of the shot work, certainly all the tornadoes, were done at Industrial Light and Magic. And I think we pride ourselves on never saying that and always trying to come up with a way to do something new. So even when Isaac said, oh, look, I want a tornado made of fire, what do? There are examples of real tornadoes. And one of the great things about Isaac was he was very much wanting to match reality. He wanted what the audience is seeing on the screen to be something that they really could see in real life if they happen to be unfortunate enough to be in those circumstances. So he kept us to a realism as well. And I think that the result of all of that is just something that is, just means that people can just enjoy the story and be transported by the story. But it doesn't matter how fantastic the request is and how difficult the request is. Working with a team of filmmakers like this, and then working with the ILM crew and supervisors, you're just like, you know what? I don't know how we're going to do it now. I can't answer the question. I'll get back to you, but we're going to try, and we're going to do our best. So, it's just makes it such an exciting job to do, right?
Well, you have the most interesting, exciting job out there in the business. So, Ben, thank you very much for this conversation about Twisters on the behind the scenes. I mean, the only thing that was missing is to actually have a camera inside a real Twister, but who knows? Maybe that will come in the next film.
Well, we're lucky because on one of the days, ironically filming in Oklahoma, and it was quite a stormy year this year, we got shut down by the weather a lot of the times. And one time our set blew away and we had to rebuild it so we could destroy it again. And another time we got shut down and the meteorologist that we were working with asked Isaac and I if we wanted to come storm chasing with him. So we jumped into my car and went roaring off to Texas and chased some real tornadoes. It was exciting stuff. And I think it gives you a little bit of an extra perspective as you come to make the visual effects later.
Wow, that is great to hear, but it's not on my bucket list. So thank you very much for speaking to us. Appreciate
Great
it.
speaking to you.